Hello, everybody. Back again with another fresh installment here, coming to you live with a post game analysis or recap of game number 7 between none other than the young Indian talent, uh, Gukesh D, up against the reigning world heavyweight champion Ding Liren. Before we get into this recap today, I must apologize for being a bit delayed. Recap today, I should have done it yesterday, but I was dealing with the flu and my voice was a bit hoarse, so couldn't really record yesterday. But we are back here today, and Game 7 had offered a lot of excitement, twists and turns. In many ways, Game 7 was dubbed to be what Game 6 normally is. So, in this game, then, we have Kuki starting with 1 knight to f3. Ding responds with d5, g3, g6 by Ding, d4, bishop to g7, c4. So there's a lot of transpositions here from the King's Indian attack to the modern defense. C6 by Ding, very Slav-like, except with there's a g6 now. Very common played by the Chinese players. C6 in the Slav structures. Bishop to g2 then, knight to f6. Now it's a King's Indian transposition again. Then finally we have castles by Kuki. Ding responds by casting as well. And now finally we find ourselves in the Neo-Grunfeld defense, um, the original defensive variation of that. Standard Grunfeld is the same as this, as the setup we have here for black, just without the bishop being on g2 um, in the structure. So in the standard Grunfeld, how it would be played is, um, say, started with d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, d5, uh, captures, captures, e4, knight to c3, knight captures c3, and b takes on c3, and then c5 to follow, or bishop g7, and then castles. So that would be the traditional exchange variation of the Grunfeld, but it takes a slightly different path in, as we see. And already here after bishop g2, knight f6, castles, castles, Gukesh comes with a surprise of rook to e1. Now, as Magnus Carlsen even said, this is vintage Gaevsky, one of Gukesh's trainers and uh, team members preparing him for his World Championship, specifically for opening repertoire. Rook e1 is one of the most rare moves in the position. In fact, the 17th most common move in the position, so extremely rare. Normally, you just capture right to go knight c3, queen b3 ideas. Magnus played this against Nepo in his World Championship match, and the game just continued there in more regular fashion, at least more known territorial theory. But we had rook e1 here. After rook e1, Ding spent about 30 minutes on this move, capturing d takes c, which is correct. And Ding now has slight advantage. But Kuki hardly spent any time here, 4 or 5 minutes only. So time is a very important factor in these stages. We can now see that Ding has been surprised, right? After e4, we have bishop g5, g4. Still playing accurate. Knight b to d2 and c5. Now, engine is suggesting b5 and just hold on to the pawn. But because Ding has spent so much time in this position, he does go for the more natural looking move, c5, which is typical in the Grunfeld structures, as we saw earlier when we did the exchange variation, showing its moves, right? So c5, and Gukesh rightfully doesn't capture, rather goes d5, because if we go back, if we go c, d takes c, well, just knight f to d7, and pawn is under attack here on c5. If you go knight b d7, well, not as great, because now you get e5 and the knight has to go become passive, or go to d5, and thereafter you'll just collect the pawn. There's attacks on the knight. Yeah. Very uncouplable. You'd have to go knight b4 and then maybe knight c6 ideas later after a3. So let's say, for example, there a3 and knight c6. Yes. So After d5, then Ding rightfully plays e6 to try and break down that center. And Gukesh here goes h3. Ding then captures, and we have bishop captures. Queen captures is also fine, um, but bishop captures is slightly preferred. Reason being, if we go queen takes on f3, then well, rook to e8, and we're more into equality now. After that, we'd have rook to d1, for example, and now your simple e takes, and again now it's apt to go knight b to d7, as earlier on we couldn't go knight b to d7 because the f knight would just be pushed around, but there is no e pawn now for that thrust to e5. So knight b to d7, you just comfortably developing and the game goes on. So instead of queen takes f3, we have bishop takes f3, e takes, e takes, and as seen knight b to d7. Just the only difference is now the queen is on its starting square, not on f3. So we'll see how important this actually becomes as the game progresses. Knight to c4, and here we actually see it immediately because now the d file's opening and it helps with the assist of potentially thrusting that pawn forward. Knight to c4 then, and b5 correctly played by Ding. So we can see it's very dynamic. There's a lot of attacks on the flank happening. Pawns are advancing. So, uh, optically speaking, if you look at this, um, white, okay, from an objective point, perhaps white is preferred, but from a more human standpoint, black would enjoy this position. There's more space here for the pieces to develop. The queen's coming out soon. Then drop to a5, b6, e7. The rook will come in. The bishop is which and it has space as well. So a lot to play for here. So and queen to b6. After queen to b6, then we have bishop to f4, just taking up space on this file and stopping rook to b8 ideas. Okay, rook f to e8, Thing just wants to trade off some pieces, some heavy pieces, queen to d2, rook a to d8 then. Thing just getting his rook in line with Gukesh's queen, knight to c2. The idea perhaps is to go knight to e3, add more defense here on this pawn to secure it even more, right? Knight f8 and b4. Well, or not even there, just to go for this b4 thrust, which is a very, very sharp move, right? So it's important here not to capture this pawn as being rightfully played c4. If you capture, it's very tricky. You're losing tempi. It's all about tempi, right? As GM Jan Ludwig Hammer even said, all about the tempi here. And Ding is much lower on the clock than Gukesh in this position. Time was a big factor here. So after queen that, bishop d3, queen to d6, bishop takes a7, and these pawns are also vulnerable. So you might end up losing them. One of them, both of them, or at least one of them, if not both of them. And we'd have this position where this a pawn is advanced, and we'd see later in the game that how Gukesh ends up generating passed pawns. Are they connected or not? We'll find out. So after b4, we have c4 by Ding then. c4, bishop to e3 regardless is played, but there was no capture, so the pawn structure is still intact. Bishop to e3, we have queen to a6. Ding just sliding out of the way. And now bishop to d4. Cookie just centralizing his bishop, creating a nice shield here. Look how beautiful that bishop looks, eyeing all the long squares like an X, right? Shout out Orlando Pirates. I'm a Chief supporter though, but you know, guys, come on. It hasn't been easy for the Chiefs. Bishop to d4. All right. That's why I'm recording like sundowns when the sun's down because it's quiet. About how we lost against Sundowns not too long ago, which was bad. But anyway, back to the chess. Bishop to d4. And rook takes. The pieces are traded. Queen takes a2. And here we have, after queen takes a2, which was not recommended, the best move here was just rook e8 and to try and trade off another set of rooks, right? Because if we have rook e8, and let's say Gukesh goes for this, well, Thing's quite happy. The game's equal then, right? Bishop's developing, the pieces will fly off the board, and it's good. Well, not knight takes, king takes, because the knight you want to come here for the blockade. And yeah, there's nothing much there. But instead of that, Thing went uh, queen takes a2. And now we have rook 2. A1 and queen b3 is the only move right now. And now Gukesh has advantage. Rook a3, queen to b1 check, king to g2, rook to d7, which is a very nice move, or just like a waiting move perhaps, yeah. And it's a top recommended move, rook to d7. So we have rook to a5, which is a very good find by Gukesh. He spent a lot of time on this move, over 20 minutes, and the clock started to somewhat stabilize in the situation now. Rook to a5, um, Ding just feeling the need to get the queen away from this passive block, passive square, and to get back into the game. And the idea is to trade queens, right? Gukesh says, nope, I'm going to repeat once. Ding says, well, I can only go back to b1. We go rook back to a5, and now rook to b3. If Gukesh repeats here, then it's a draw. But even the commentators from Chess India, Sagatrasa, and the rest of the team, Stanya, they said he would never do that, and he wouldn't because he is in a position of strength. It's plus one here, plus 1.4, 1.5. So it's a near game-winning advantage. So he'd never go back to a3. Gukesh then captures on b5, and Ding in some pressure then goes queen to d3. Now let's evaluate this position a bit. And apologies, guys, this video is going to be long because it's a very long, lengthy endgame that plays out after this. Yes. Okay. The material counts even. Let's start there. Positionally, white is better, right? Nearly now +2 after this queen to d3. Because the top moves don't even involve the queen here. It's pawn push to h6, perhaps stopping these ideas, um, or the bishop from infiltrating, or h6 just to make space for the king. But these aren't really sensible moves, right? And rook d8, you're just being passive, you're going back. And Ding says, no, uh, if I just do that, I'm just waiting for your plans. Then in effect, then I don't have plans, right? Then it's just me responding. And that's the last thing you want to do. You need to try and come up with your own themes and concepts, generating counterplay. And this is exactly that. It's not the best move objectively, it's far from it, but it's forcing a response from Gukesh. Because example, if you played h6, h5, um, well then there's h4. And obviously after queen d3 now, you can't do that because you're just losing your queen. You need to respond to this, what's going on here, right? And objectively, the best move is bishop e3, and the structure is just frozen for black. There's nothing much black can do. But these are the little risks. Then, oh, you can of course trade queens, fine. But this is just a winning endgame for Gukesh. It's almost +2, right? But in a haste, Gukesh said, no, I'm not trading. I don't wanna trade with you there. Um, if anything, I'm not even gonna play bishop e3, right? I want to go queen f4 to put more pressure on the knight here. So let's just go back a step quickly. If Gukesh took the queen here, well, it's fine for Ding. This knight now has to go to a3. You cannot go, if you go e3, it's some trouble for you, yeah? You just go d2. Well, not a problem, knight to d3. And now it starts closing in on you. Rook takes d5. If you go rook takes d5, knight takes d5, the bishop has to move away. If you capture this bishop here, well, let's look at this king takes g7. The next move, the knight coming here to c3, and that's the big problem. Knight to b2. Well, we could even go pick up the pawn. Right? Okay, knight to c3 right now wouldn't do that much. As the knight will drop. It is better for black still, of course, but you just picking up the pawn. And the big problem is this passed a pawn, right? Because now you have knight to c4. Okay, you don't push it, right? You could push it, you push it right away, because if knight takes on a5, well, it's just game over. Knight to d3, and this concept comes alive again of protecting the d1 square with knight to b2, because now, okay, if you have ideas of saying, okay, knight to c4, not a problem, you're just going knight d1 check, and you're picking up this bishop. So this is the problem. If you go bishop b2, well, same. This is the line discussed. The knight to b2, you cannot stop promotion. So very important then that Gukesh did not even trade with thing there, because his pawn would be very ominous. And after c takes d, you'd have to go knight a3 just to hold on. Because of d2, then I imagine after d2, you could maybe go knight c4 yourself and hold on to that pawn and fight for that pawn, right? So We have queen to f4. After queen to f4, um, Ding captures the knight on c2. After that, we have bishop takes on f6, and Ding finds the best move instead of just trading off here, which is just beneficial for black because the queen is all up in black's grill, not cool at all. And if now queen f5, well, and queen d4, the game just goes on, and you're losing this pawn. Definitely, this pawn is very weak. It's a +2 advantage almost. Ding finds the best move and now goes for queen f5. Again, forcing the trades here. Now something's definitely falling, either the queen or the bishop. Let's say Gukesh went here. Well, not a problem. Ding just takes and now doubles the pawns and gets to capture the bishop back. This is now perfectly drawn. Ding will draw this in his sleep. But Gukesh makes it a bit more tricky. He first says, okay, I'll trade with you now, but now you have the double F pawns, not me, right? Ding says, not a problem. You're going to have to take there. In fact, you didn't even have to capture. And this simplification really helped Ding a lot in this situation. Um, we'll see why, because the king also becomes active now after bishop takes and king takes. That one square is really important here, right? So king takes on g7, rook to c5, and is bound to pick up this pawn. So Ding is bound to lose a pawn here, but the importance is for Ding is how you losing the pawn, because you know you're losing it, but it was more in Ding's terms, the way he lost this pawn, starting from the queen d3, queen takes c2, and ultimately queen to f5 continuation, right? And then even better for Ding was um, with the queens, and then Gukesh going for queen takes on bishop takes on g7, king takes g7, which really helped Ding quite a lot. And we'll see how the confidence comes alive in Ding in this now in towards the end part of the time controls, and how Ding played it really well and really quickly as well. So the confidence we see is really impressive. Six, and this knight, suddenly from being so passive earlier on, will now find life on the square. So Gukesh captures in on the c4 square, and now simply just knight to e5, forking this rook and the bishop. But it's important after rook to d4 not to capture here, as you just did in the last endgame. So for example, here, you can see the bar moving to +3, king to f6. And the reason why this is lost is then um, this king just runs up the board. This pawn is vulnerable. So let's play a few moves here, rook to d6. And now you're building up here on the side, right? And because these pawns are so doubled, or you could just run your king around. This is what they call outflanking, right? There are a lot of ideas here. The main thing is the black's king cannot do much. It's quite stranded. So this is why you would not trade off your knight for the bishop in this position. Although simplification is generally a good thing, not in this position. Even if you're trading your rooks here, it's not ideal right now. You perhaps want your king then more centralized. Around here, if you imagine these rooks gone, if the king was here, okay, yeah, then there's more potential for a draw and just getting your pawns on dark squares. So after knight to e5, rook to d4, we have knight to c6. Here you could you could go for this capture if you really wanted to, because after rook takes on d4 or d takes c and rook takes d4, you'd have bishop to e2. You cannot do this, right? Otherwise c7, you're just not in time to stop promotion because the bishop's on e2 here. And you cannot go there as well. No, you do not promote, you just capture with promotion, right? So if Guki really wanted to go into this, you play that for a draw as well to have some sort of guarantee of a draw. But then again, after this and that, Ding would clear obviously not do that. After that, you just go king f3, not f1 really. It's a bit passive. You go forward, progress your king because we're in the end game, right? And yeah, now you just have to keep an eye on this pawn because let's say you drop to b2 right now. Yeah, it's still drawish, but it's more risky. You're just connecting like that. Um, after rook to b3, uh, into f4. and the game continues, right? Yeah, perhaps not the most sound way of approaching this as well. King to e3, and you just run your king off board, right? King to f8, bishop to a6, and if you get bishop to b7, you should be fine. I imagine that's the plan. Yeah, bishop to b7, and the game continues. Okay, king to 8, queen to d3, and rook to c1. It's important here not to leave the c file now, as the c file is stopping the king from the white king from getting in. So let's say you went rook a2 here. Well, it's just over. c7, and that's it. The bishop's guarding the promoting square. Never mind that. Even if you went here now, well, okay. Now it's even better for black, because if you do that in c7 now, well, you're a bit slow because of rook to c2 check. But if you go c7 here and there, the problem is, after king to d8 and king to d6, you're just gonna check the king away. Yes, you could go to e5, but it's not a problem after c7. Um, let's say you capture, and then after that, rook to b2. You can't stop this. And the main thing here that black would do in the situation is, let's say after rook to b2, you go h5. Black's going to capture this bishop as well and have this pass a pawn. I'll show you quickly a simplification. Yeah, let's say now you went there. Well, takes, takes, takes. You could even start with just pushing a5. And the main thing is, okay, you promote there with check. Yes, your king might catch me. All good. You're just in time. But now I'm running this way with my king whilst you're still picking up this one. So yeah, c7 takes, or not c7, not c8. You need to go in. Sorry, my bad. My mouse slipped there. You capture, well, you're just too late now. You will not make it in time, and this would be a win, easy win for Gukesh in his sleep. So yeah, knight to c6 then. Very long discussion there. Knight to c6 in the way of rook to f4. Is holding equality, and now simply knight to e7 to go knight, well, to c8 and d6 to blockade. If you once you get this blockade in, it's totally fine for black. So we have b5. Cook is trying. Sorry, I went back now to the end position, spoiling the surprises. Well, the rest of the game is quite equal played out, but there is a position where Gukesh had potential to win this whole thing, the whole game. So after rook to d4, then we had knight to c6 and rook to f4. Um, Knight to e7 then, and b5. After b5, we have king to f6 correctly played, rook to d4, and h6. We're now approaching move 40 of the time control, and this was Ding's 40th move. If everyone was saying knight to c8 and knight to d6, and you just blockade, and you find white can never make progress here, just be a draw. Like for instance here, you can't even capture because the rook's blocking. You can't go here because your king will just go back and defend on g7 or g6, and the knight's doing a very good job in defending, preventing this pawn from moving. But here in this immense time pressure, Ding goes king to e5, and the reason why this gives Gukesh some advantage again is the principle of two weaknesses in the endgame, and I'll show you why. So after king to e5, Gukesh has this now, rook to h4, and the difference now is that the king cannot go to g6 now because it's too far away now. It's one square away. So if you think, okay, I'm going to defend with the rook on d6, now Gukesh will just swing the rook over to a4 and attack this rook, this pawn that's weak. And now you can't even do this, right? You just clearly lost there and you run it up. Even if you went rook takes, and you think, okay, I could defend it with a rook. Well, no, it doesn't work now because the rook is overloaded. It went from defending this pawn to having shifted up, and now rook to a6. Look at that beautiful move. Now this pawn is overloaded. Yes, you could maybe go and say, okay, I'm going to go knight to g8. Well, you're just passive now. d6, and your knight's losing all its squares. The goal here, of course, is just to go after, let's say, knight f6. You're just gonna, I imagine you go bishop c6, yeah, and win the game. That's too much pressure because here now, okay, you think you find no, the pass B pawn. The importance of that pass B pawn, as we discussed earlier, that Cookie ends up having a passed pawn or two. So these are the dynamics because here after that, okay, you might go rook d8, ideas, but it doesn't even work anymore. You could capture here, you could run this up. It's all just bad. You could go there, rook d1 and you go king f2, right? Or g2, sorry. And that's it. You just down two pawns. You have a passed b pawn. The knight's not doing much now, can't do much anymore, doesn't really have squares. For instance, it can't go there. It can only go back to g8, can't go there, can't go there, can't go there, cannot go there because of this bishop here. So, and Gukesh finds rook to h4. And after this, Ding captures on d5 um, out of some desperation now. Because in the press conference, he said he was struggling to find ideas after this, so was ready to give up. Okay, Gukesh captures on h6. And now we have knight to c3. Knight to c3, well, ideally we just want this pawn, right? Let's say h4 here, and if Ding can get that pawn, we're now more in Troyish territory. But after knight to c3, we have rook to c6 attacking this knight. Knight to e4 then. And here, a mistake by Gukesh. King to e1. This king to e1 really drops some advantage for him because it's constricting squares for the king. Cannot enter, right? So after king to e1, we have f6, which is a really good move by Ding. It was very much praised by Magnus. All of these guys by Magnus. Um, this f6 move because it's one of the only moves that keeps the game going. The best move here is rook to d5 to apply more pressure, but Ding's just defending on the seventh here and ensuring that no pawns would fall. Because f6 also then um, allows the rook to swing in here, right, for more ideas to attack on the seventh. Because after f6 now we have h4 and rook to d3 attacking the bishop. Bishop to d1 then. More ideal would have been now king to e2 or just to capture on e4. If you capture here, it's important not to go king captures because rook on e6 and there's not much for you to do after this. Rook to e6, king to d5 and you're just winning both these pawns. Then all of a sudden f6 was very bad. Sorry, I again went away. Where are we now? We are nearing the end. We are nearing the end of this long recap. Very exciting game by these top players, man. So we had rook to d3, and after rook to d3, then we have bishop takes on e4 and f. And we were discussing this, right? Not to go with the king because all your pieces were just for after king d5, you're just capturing on f6 or going king e2, getting more space. All right. So instead of all that, we had bishop to d1. After bishop to d1, Ding's finding these strong moves, f4, going for the undoubling of the pawns. And now after this undoubles, this is where all the commentators said that now we in very much Croatia territory, but it's still tricky. The main reason was because there's a disconnect now between the G and H pawns to maybe thrust forward and cause pressure. So king captures on f4. If anything, now you could even say that wow, Ding's the one that position optically looks more scary, right? The king is active, close into the white's camp. The knight is active, literally staring down the king, and the rook is on d3. Um, but after bishop to c2, rook to d5, uh, rook to c4, things playing accurately f5, and suddenly the game is just dead drawn. It's equal, and for the next few moves, it's equal yarn out after rook b4, king f3, bishop to d1, king to g2, rook to b3, rook to e5, and f4. We have rook to e7. It's important here, not e6 because rook to e3 is a bit annoying. Because rook to e3, you think, okay, you're solving problems. Not really. Okay, it is still level, but it's not. It will be much more trickier. It's all zeros. So on a deeper depth, that's also fine. But Ding opted to go rook to e7 instead of e6, rook to e3, and now we simply have rook to h4. And that's why we said earlier on after this, when the pawn got taken off, that the removal of G and H, right? Apologies for that light, guys. The electricity went off in my area, but it came back now seemingly. All right, we have rook to h7, h5, and that's just Gukesh telling thing. Okay, um, you can go for it now. I can go for it again after knight f6, right? Because the bishop is still guarding on d1. We have knight to f6, rook to e5, knight captures on h5. It's back again. It's off again. Guys, this is kind of weird. I apologize for this. Scary. Rook to f5, and now knight to g3. Just removing the knight away because it has been doubly attacked. Rook to f8, rook to b7. And now the King's plan is just to swing the knight over and gobble up this pawn. Gukesh has no bishop a4. I'm going to defend it. King to f3, uh, f5. We have f4, f6, knight to e4, and here it's all played out. Bishop to c2, uh, knight to d6, rook to d8, king to e5, just coming forward with the king defending and attacking the pawn. We have bishop to b3, and hereafter knight to f7, rook to d5, captures on f7, king to d2. These next moves were played out relatively quickly after rook to b6, bishop to c4, rook to d6. And yeah, it's if you trade off, it's just draws, right? Yeah, yeah. And you drop back the bishop, and Ding would give up his knight for the pawn. This ends up happening after king to c3, rook takes on d5, bishop takes on d5, knight to d6, king to b4, Ding captures um, the knight on b5, king captures on b5, and a6 check. And after a6 check, we have king captures on a6. And with that, it's a draw due to insufficient material. So yes, guys, this game showed to be very exciting with a lot of twists and turns. We had Gukesh attacking ferociously, but we also had Ding show us his resilience. I think this game summarized in one sentence would be um, Gukesh showed why he's the challenger, is the defending champion. So thanks for tuning in, guys. It's been quite a long recap. I won't keep you much longer. I'll be covering Game 8, which also took place today. And then Game 9 is coming up in a few hours, so we'll be back on track with that. So, yeah, do stay tuned and thank you for tuning in. Take care.